Welcome back, everyone, to another deep dive. This time, we're tackling turning obstacles into opportunities for growth.
Obstacles into opportunities. That's a fascinating concept.
It is, and we've got some incredible figures to help us understand it.
Oh, woohoo.
Well, we're diving into the lives and philosophies of folks like Abraham Lincoln, Theodore Roosevelt, even those ancient Stoic philosophers.
Wow. Those are some pretty heavy hitters. What can we learn from them about this whole obstacle thing?
They all viewed obstacles not as something to fear, but almost like stepping stones.
Stepping stones. You mean like challenges actually help us grow?
Yeah, exactly. It's like bring on the challenges, that's how we get stronger.
Right. So it's not about avoiding the tough stuff, it's about leaning into it. That's a pretty radical idea.
It is. And, the Stoics back then, they believed the world was unpredictable.
Yeah, makes sense. So much is out of our control.
Right. So instead of trying to control everything, they focused on what they could control, their mindset, their actions, and their reactions.
Interesting. So recognizing you can't control the waves, but you can learn to surf.
Precisely. And that's where Lincoln, Roosevelt, and all these amazing figures come in. They faced incredible challenges. But instead of letting those obstacles crush them,
They use them as fuel to become stronger.
more resilient and ultimately more successful.
I like it. So where do we start? Who do we tackle first?
Well, let's start with Lincoln. We all know him as this iconic figure of strength. But he actually struggled with depression throughout his life.
Really? I never knew that. That's not something you hear about very often.
It's true. And his struggles were pretty intense, but they also played a huge role in shaping who he became. He had to develop incredible resilience just to get through each day.
So you're saying his struggles actually became his superpower?
You could put it that way. The discipline he developed to manage his depression, the ability to find meaning in suffering.
Wow. Even to contextualize it. Those sound like pretty crucial skills, especially for leading a nation during a civil war.
Absolutely. And speaking of finding meaning, it makes me think about Lincoln's famous saying, "This too shall pass."
Oh, yeah, I love that quote. It's so simple but so powerful.
And for Lincoln, it wasn't just a catchy phrase. It was a reflection of his deep understanding of impermanence. He understood that both good times and bad times are transient.
It's like riding a wave. You got to ride the highs and the lows, knowing it will eventually settle.
Exactly. And that mindset helped him conquer his own inner demons and lead during some of the most challenging times in our nation's history.
Okay, so Lincoln teaches us about resilience in the face of personal struggles. But what about someone like Theodore Roosevelt? That guy was like bursting with energy. Did he even have
You'd
obstacles?
be surprised. Roosevelt wasn't always the picture of strength and vitality.
No way, really.
Yeah. As a child, he was incredibly frail and suffered from really debilitating asthma.
No way. The Rough Rider had asthma. I never would have guessed.
It's true. And you know what his father did? Challenged him to build his body.
Wow, that's tough love right there.
But it worked. Through years of rigorous training, Roosevelt transformed himself. Went from a sickly kid to this powerful, physically imposing figure.
That's incredible. Talk about taking charge of your destiny.
And it reminds me of that Stoic concept of the inner citadel.
The inner citadel. What's that?
It's like this mental fortress we can cultivate through discipline, self-improvement, and facing our weaknesses head on.
I see. Like building up those inner defenses to prepare for whatever life throws your way.
Exactly. And Roosevelt's whole philosophy of the strenuous life, it embodies this perfectly.
He was all about pushing his limits and embracing challenge.
Makes you wonder, though. It's great to be resilient like Lincoln and prepared like Roosevelt, but what about those curveballs that we just don't see coming?
Yeah, how do you prepare for the unknown?
That's where a technique called the pre-mortem comes in.
The pre-mortem. That sounds kind of ominous, like planning your own funeral before you even start something.
The name might sound a little dark,
Uh,
but it's actually a really useful technique. Basically, you force yourself to think about all the things that could go wrong before they happen.
So it's like running a simulation of everything that could go south.
Yeah. And then you come up with backup plans. It's about mentally preparing yourself for the unexpected.
Makes sense. So you're not totally blindsided when things go wrong.
Exactly. And, this idea actually comes from the Stoics. They called it premeditatio malorum.
Premeditatio malorum. I'm not even going to try to pronounce that.
Don't worry about it.
Hmm.
But yeah, it basically means premeditation of evils.
Yikes.
Yeah.
That sounds intense, but I guess it makes sense. You have to be realistic, right? Life isn't always rainbows and butterflies.
Right. And it makes you really think, am I really prepared if things suddenly take a turn for the worse?
I know, right? It's like Mike Tyson said, if you're not humble, life will visit humbleness upon you.
Ooh, good quote. So it's not about becoming a pessimist, it's about being prepared. But what happens when you hit a wall? Something you just can't overcome? Is it all about pushing through no matter what?
That's a good question. Not necessarily. Sometimes it's about accepting what we can't change and finding a detour. The art of acquiescence.
Acquiescence. That sounds a bit like giving up.
Not at all. It's more like recognizing that the path to our goals might not always be a straight line.
Okay.
I'm listening.
It's like, think of water flowing around a rock. It finds a way, right?
Right. So instead of getting stuck on the obstacle, we look for a way around it.
Exactly. Do you know Thomas Jefferson, the guy who wrote the Declaration of Independence?
Of course. Who doesn't know Thomas Jefferson?
Well, believe it or not, he was believed to have a speech impediment.
What? The guy who wrote the Declaration of Independence couldn't give a speech. That's wild.
Right, but instead of letting that define him, he channeled his energy into his writing, became a master of the written word. Wow, so he basically said, okay, I might not be a great speaker, but I can write like nobody's business.
Exactly. He turned his perceived weakness into a strength. That's acquiescence in action.
I love that. So it's about seeing limitations, not as roadblocks, but as opportunities to develop new skills.
It's like navigating traffic. You might hit a red light, but you'll still reach your destination eventually.
That's a great analogy. So it's not about wishing the red light wasn't there. It's about knowing you'll still get to where you're going, even if it takes a little longer.
And sometimes that detour might even lead you to an even better destination.
This is really resonating with me. We've talked about resilience, preparation, even accepting what we can't change. What's the next step in this whole turning obstacles into opportunities journey?
Well, now we get to the really interesting part. It's about moving beyond simply accepting obstacles to actually embracing them, even learning to love them. The Stoics called this amor fati.
Wait, hold on. Loving our fate. That sounds kind of extreme, doesn't it? I mean, what if your fate is like getting hit by a bus?
That's a common misconception. Amor fati isn't about blindly accepting every bad thing that happens to you. It's more about recognizing that even those really challenging experiences can actually offer opportunities for growth.
Okay, I'm trying to wrap my head around this, but how can you love something like losing your job or getting really sick?
Think about it this way. What if those difficult experiences, painful as they are actually kind of nudging you towards something better?
Nudging you towards something better. I've never thought of it that way.
Yeah, what if they're revealing some strength you didn't even know you had, or forcing you to rethink your priorities, make some positive changes?
I guess I could see that. It's like that saying, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. But how do you actually put that into practice? I mean, are there any examples of people who really embodied this amor fati idea?
Absolutely. Remember Thomas Edison and the fire that destroyed his factory?
Oh, yeah, that's right. He lost like years of work, all that equipment.
Devastating.
Totally. I can't even imagine. He must have been crushed.
But instead of giving up, you know what he did? He saw it as a chance for a fresh start.
A fresh start. Wow.
There's a famous quote from him that day. He said, "All our mistakes are burned up. Thank God we can start anew."
That's amazing that he could see the positive in that situation.
Yeah.
He didn't just bounce back, he thrived.
Exactly. He turned a major setback into fuel for even greater success. That's the power of this mindset.
So it's not about pretending bad things don't happen. It's about choosing how you respond to them.
Right. You can let them break you, or you can use them as fuel for growth.
Makes me think of the boxer, Jack Johnson, the first African-American heavyweight champion. He faced so much racism and hatred, but he never let it get to him.
He was incredible.
He actually used it as fuel,
Awesome.
smiling through it all, and ultimately triumphing over his opponents.
He's a perfect example of someone who turned hate into power.
Okay, I'm starting to get it. It's about seeing obstacles not as the enemy, but as like unexpected teachers or something.
Exactly. They can show us things about ourselves, about life.
But let's be real. Some challenges just require sheer grit and determination to get through, even with the best mindset. So how do we cultivate that kind of perseverance?
You're absolutely right. Mindset isn't always enough. You need perseverance too, that unwavering determination to keep going, even when things are tough.
Yeah, it's more than just working hard.
It's about having that mental and emotional stamina to withstand setbacks, staying committed to your goals, even when the path is unclear.
So it's about not giving up, even when you really, really want to.
Exactly. Think about Odysseus, the Greek hero, the guy who spent 10 years trying to get home after the Trojan War.
Oh, yeah. Talk about a long commute.
He faced storms, monsters, even the wrath of the gods, but he never lost sight of his goal.
His story is insane. It's like one obstacle after another, but he just keeps going. It's inspiring, even if it is a bit unbelievable.
Well, it is a myth, but still, Odysseus is a classic example of perseverance in action.
Yeah. He had to adapt, make hard decisions, and just keep moving forward, even when he probably felt totally lost and hopeless.
That's what perseverance is all about.
It takes serious strength to keep going like that. Reminds me of the explorer Magellan and his journey around the world.
Ah, Magellan. Now there was a man of perseverance.
He faced unbelievable hardships, starvation, mutiny, you name it. But his sheer will to keep going was a key factor in his success.
Magellan had that Sitzfleisch, as the Germans would say.
Sitzfleisch. What is that? Some kind of German delicacy.
Haha.
Huh?
No, it literally translates to sitting flesh.
Sitting flesh.
It basically means having the stamina to stick with something even when it's really uncomfortable or challenging. It's that ability to stay in the game, even when the odds are stacked against you.
Sitzfleisch. I
Mm.
love it. It's more than just taking action. It's about having the mental toughness to see things through to the end.
Exactly. And while having that Sitzfleisch is crucial, there's another powerful source of strength we can tap into, especially when facing those really, really tough challenges. It's about connecting to something bigger than ourselves.
Something bigger than ourselves. What do you mean by that?
It's about finding a cause, a purpose, or even a community that gives you the strength to keep going even when you feel totally depleted.
I see. So it's like finding a reason to keep fighting, even when you're exhausted and ready to throw in the towel.
Exactly. Think about James Stockdale and John McCain, who were both prisoners of war in Vietnam. They endured, unimaginable hardship, but they found a way to survive, and not just survive, but thrive in those horrific conditions.
I've read about their experiences. It's seriously remarkable how they maintain their strength and spirit in such brutal conditions. How did they do it?
Well, Stockdale, who is the highest-ranking Navy POW, he focused on providing leadership and support to his fellow prisoners. He understood that in that situation, their survival depended on their unity, their willingness to help each other.
So even in that unbelievably challenging environment, he found a way to turn it into an opportunity for service. That's amazing.
It is. And for McCain, it was his commitment to his fellow prisoners and his refusal to abandon them. That gave him the strength to endure torture and resist early release.
Wow. They both chose to focus on something larger than their own personal suffering.
And, it's not just in those extreme situations that this applies. It's relevant to everyday life, too.
So you're saying that when we connect to something bigger than ourselves, we tap into a deeper well of strength.
Exactly. Whether it's a cause, a community, even just a commitment to helping others, it can give you that extra push when you need it.
It's like tapping into some hidden reserve of energy and motivation.
Exactly. It's like finding your true north.
Oh, I love that analogy, that guiding principle that helps you navigate through tough times.
And you know what? Everyone's true north is different. What matters is that you find yours.
Reminds me of a quote by Henry Rollins. He said, "People are getting a little desperate. People might not show their best elements to you. You must never lower yourself to being a person you don't like. There is no better time than now to have a moral and civic backbone, to have a moral and civic true north. This is a tremendous opportunity for you, a young person, to be heroic."
Powerful quote. It really speaks to the importance of having that moral compass, that inner guidance, especially when things get tough.
Okay, so we've talked about resilience, preparation, acceptance, even embracing our fate and persevering, and finding strength in something bigger than ourselves. What's the final piece of this puzzle, that last step in turning obstacles into opportunities?
Well, the final piece might surprise you. It's about something a lot of people try to avoid thinking about:
Uh-oh, what is it?
our own mortality.
Whoa, meditating on death. I thought we were trying to be, more optimistic here.
I know, it might sound a little heavy, but trust me on this one. The Stoics called this memento mori.
Memento mori. What does that even mean?
It means remember that you will die. But it's not about being morbid or anything. It's about having a healthy awareness of our own impermanence.
Okay, I'm listening.
Yeah.
But how does thinking about death help us turn obstacles into opportunities? Seems kind of backwards.
It's about perspective. When you remember that your time is limited, you're less likely to waste it on things that don't really matter. Get bogged down by insignificant setbacks.
So it's a way to, cut through the noise and focus on what's really important.
Exactly. And when we embrace our own mortality, it also helps us approach life with a sense of urgency and gratitude.
That makes sense. You appreciate the good moments more.
Exactly. And learn from the tough ones. Each day becomes more precious.
Right. Makes me think of the writer Michel de Montaigne. You
Yeah.
familiar with him?
Oh, yeah, of course. The French Renaissance guy.
That's the one. He had this near-death experience, got thrown from his horse,
Yeah.
and it was that experience that made him decide to really embrace life and become a writer.
It's amazing how confronting our own mortality can sometimes push us toward a more vibrant, more meaningful life.
It's like you get a wake-up call, and you realize you don't have forever to chase your dreams and, make your mark on the world.
Exactly. Memento Mori is about embracing the present moment, appreciating the time we have, and recognizing that every obstacle, every challenge is a chance for growth and transformation.
This has been eye-opening. Resilience, acceptance, finding strength in something bigger than ourselves, it's all connected.
It really is. It's not about following a strict set of rules or anything. It's about a way of being, a mindset that lets you approach challenges with courage, with creativity, with purpose.
So what would you say is the ultimate takeaway here? If we had to boil down all this wisdom into one principle, what would it be?
It's an idea that's been around for centuries.
Mhm.
It's simple, but so powerful that obstacle becomes the way.
The obstacle becomes the way.
I love that. It reminds us that what we see as setbacks can actually be the path to our greatest growth, our most significant transformations.
It's a reminder that challenges aren't roadblocks. They're opportunities.
Exactly. And it's about shifting your perspective, seeing adversity not as something to fear, but as a teacher, as a guide, a catalyst for growth.
Looking back at all the people we've talked about, Lincoln, Roosevelt, Edison, Stockdale, McCain, they all faced huge challenges, but they used them to achieve greatness.
And they weren't superhuman or anything. They were just ordinary people who understood the power of perception, action, and will.
It's like they had this internal compass that helped them navigate through the tough times and come out stronger on the other side.
And you know what? That compass is available to all of us. It's about mastering your inner world, cultivating resilience, and choosing to see obstacles not as setbacks, but as stepping stones.
So where do we start? If we want to actually embody this principle, this idea of the obstacle becomes the way.
It starts with three core disciplines: perception, action, and will.
Break those down for me.
Perception is about seeing clearly. Recognizing that our first reactions might be clouded by fear or frustration, you got to take a step back, breathe, and see things for what they really are.
So it's like master your emotions. Don't
Yeah.
let them run the show.
Exactly. Then you can move into action, taking those decisive steps, exploring every option, and putting in the work to either overcome the obstacle or find a way around it.
It's not passive. It's about actively looking for solutions.
Right. And lastly, you have will. It's about that mental and emotional strength to persevere, to stay committed to what you want to achieve, even when you feel like giving up.
That inner strength, that never give up attitude.
Exactly. Knowing that setbacks happen, but they don't define you. It's about having that resilience to bounce back, learn, and keep moving forward.
So clear perception to see the obstacle, decisive action to engage with it, and an unwavering will to see it through.
You got it. And remember, this is just the start. The real work begins when you put these principles into practice, when you start seeing obstacles as opportunities.
This has been amazing. I feel like I have a totally new perspective on how to deal with challenges.
I'm so glad. Just remember, this is a journey, and the obstacle is the way.
What a powerful message. Thanks so much for joining us today. It's been truly enlightening.
My pleasure.
And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the power of obstacles. We hope you found it as inspiring as we have. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and remember the obstacle is the way.